Trauma ruptures identity. Identity is the habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And a traumatic event is a mass of energy that collides with that habit, with that identity at a force, at an intensity that disintegrates those habits, that shatters the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And in the shattering of the identity, it also shatters confidence. Confidence in the ability to hold the identity. And the crisis that trauma presents and represents is the question, can I restore confidence in an ability to hold an identity that is capable of surviving and relating to the larger ecology that I'm a part of? And the answer takes time. It takes, ultimately, the cure is a new identity or a new iteration of the old identity. You could think of it in technical terms. If you're driving and your hand is sticking out the window, and a traumatic event could be the taking off of an arm, or shattering the arm. And what may need to change in order to have a confident new identity in this metaphor is simply to be able to drive and not have one's hand, sticking a few feet out the window. And thus in those narrow areas that we sometimes drive through, not ripping part of the body apart. Similarly, in a financial collapse where you have an identity of a successful investor and then suddenly you lose 90% of you and your client's money, your identity is ripped away from you. But if in careful analysis you understand, one, the mistake, two, that you can recover with the remaining 10%, one, the mistake, two, that you can recover, and three, that you develop an iterated identity, a new identity that avoids that mistake and builds on the strengths, and then develop confidence through experience, that is the ultimate healing of the traumatic experience, of the pattern of reliving. Because one of the gifts that one could see in the PTSD phenomena of reliving and reliving and reliving a traumatic event is that it is a knock on the door that says, get over this, get over this, get over this, get over this, get over this. And I'm going to keep knocking until you iterate, until you respond, until you show up and develop an identity capable of avoiding this particular trauma the next time around, recovering from the past trauma, and developing confidence. And I'm going to keep hammering at you until you succeed. And there's a couple of iterations that are important. One is forgiveness, meaning if the traumatic event comes up again, and again I say, I cannot forgive myself and I cannot forgive others, it comes up again. And I cannot forgive myself and I cannot forgive others, it comes up again. That's part of moving beyond the identity, the coping identity, which is the victim or wound identity or the perpetrator identity. If I cannot forgive the perpetrator, I also cannot forgive the victim in a deeper sense, because you cannot have a perpetrator without the victim. If I cannot forgive the victim, I cannot forgive the perpetrator in a deeper sense, because you cannot have a victim without a perpetrator. There is a link between those two things. And although it's incredibly important to differentiate things like a government official abusing their power with a citizen who doesn't have a gun and all of that type of thing, or a parent abusing an infant, you cannot look at those in the same way because of the dynamics of scale. But there is still the forgiveness of reality itself, because reality produces, in the midst of the possibility field and the probability field that is reality, those pairings. Meaning, with a very complex reality, you have a very wide possibility and probability field. And part of what happens in a wide probability and possibility field is that sometimes people with very different powers, a karate black belt with a machine gun pairs up with a 6-year-old boy. And when those interact in conflict, it's the 6-year-old boy who gets harmed, not because they're wrong, not because they're bad, but because of that big gap in power, which in a sociopathic algorithm of operating system of thought leads to abuse of power, severe abuse of power, which leads to severe shame and all of that. And so within a highly complex reality, those bullies and victims are going to pair up sometimes. And so there's also the ability, the willingness or ability to understand how possibility and probability fields work. And that the opposite happens on the other side, that within a wide probability and possibility field, you also have great generosity and great kindness emerge at times, and heroism emerge at times. And you also have healthy use of power emerge at times. Within a probability field, within a possibility field, all of those things are going to occur to some degree. And so can we accept a reality? Can we forgive a reality where that is the case? And can we become who we want to become? Anyway, in the context of what is, because the possibility field is, the probability field is, the actuality field is. And while they're more and more dense, you have the possibility field, the probability field, and the most dense of all is what's actually happening and what has happened, the denseness of the present moment. Can we hold our identity in the presence of that actual reality, the probable reality, the possible reality? Or can we not face certain possibilities, certain probabilities, certain actualities, and thus not accept the present? Not accept the probable, the possible, be at war with what is, in a war that we will always lose. And so it's a shaky identity. The medicine for trauma and PTSD is a confident new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, being and doing that works with reality, that partners with reality, which means moving through and moving beyond the trauma, which means letting go of the trauma, which includes forgiveness in some fashion. It can be, I hate parts of reality and I accept my hate and I'm willing to move on. I'm enraged and I will try and change parts of reality and I accept my limitations, my inability to change all dis-ease, all harm in all areas. I accept who I am, I accept my reactions, I accept reality, and I move through reality in a way that does not deny, that doesn't fight, but that works with that reality. The reality of my feelings, the reality of my memories, the reality of reality. Can I do that? Because if I cannot face that, if I cannot look at that, if I just cannot look at that and move on, then I'm stuck in the shattered identity that I cannot survive. And so I'm going over and over and over and over, and I cannot accept the way you responded, and I cannot accept this, and I cannot accept this. The medicine is a future, a present, an identity that is beyond the wound, that makes peace with reality, and has a new stable identity on the other side of reality. This is the urgent knock on the door that trauma and PTSD provide, and the release of all that fear, all that terror, all that tension, the feeling of death, the fear of death is transmuted, is transcended with an identity on the other side. And I think, as I look at my own response, that as I can accept and love the new identity, as I can make peace with I am okay, meaning this trauma has changed me. I will never be the same again. I have lost this. That bit has adjusted there. This is increased, this is decreased. And I now have a new identity. And I can love and accept that identity in me, which transfers then to an ability to love and accept the world that gave rise to this new identity. When that peace is made, when that new energy crystallizes into a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I'm confident in, that I love, that I accept, that I forgive, in a world that I love, accept, and forgive, then I can move on.